Hello, welcome to the channel. So we've got 16 oddities of US geography today. This video was done by Geography King. I'm gonna leave his channel down below. Go check him out, you guys. And if you want to see more reactions from me, just hit that subscribe button down below. Oh, and by the way, if you didn't know already, I do have a Twitch channel where I go live every single week, so feel free to come join me over there. It's free to join, free to watch, and all that good stuff. So anyways, let's get started. Alrighties. Probably.
Hey there, it's Kyle discussing 16 geographic oddities and quirks in the US. This is a huge country, but a lot of it follows kind of a uniform or predictable geography, but there are several places in this country that really don't follow the rules. Some of these are pretty odd, some are kind of quirky, and some are just kind of like, really kind of stuff.
Okay,
and
okay.
you may have heard of some of these, you might be familiar with some of this stuff, and others you might not have heard of. And this isn't a countdown. I'm not going to be like, oh, this one's crazier than the next one kind of thing. It's just kind of going over some unique aspects of American geography.
Sounds
I
good.
live in Tennessee, so I'm going to start off with one about Tennessee. It's one of the strangest shaped states in the country. And one of the quirks about the state is that if there were two people in Bristol at the eastern end of the state, one started driving north toward Detroit, one started driving west towards Memphis, the one driving north would be in Canada before the one driving west would be in Memphis. So just with how wide the state is, it's not a huge state in terms of total area, but because of the strange shape, it really does go really far east to west.
That's crazy.
And that's a good segue to the second one, and that's if you are in Detroit and you want to go to Canada, you'll have to drive south. The southwestern corner of Ontario extends to kind of just southeast of Michigan. So if you want to head to the Great White North from Detroit, you got to head south.
That's so funny.
Something else that's quirky is that the highest point in the contiguous U.S. is Mount Whitney at over 14,400 feet. And the lowest point in the U.S. is Badwater Basin and Death Valley National Park, which is almost 300 feet below sea level. And why this is so quirky is that they are 85 miles apart from each other. So in a country that's 3,000 miles wide, the highest and lowest points are 85 miles apart. That's pretty quirky.
It is
The next few are based upon the shape of the country. So the coastlines aren't directly north-south, and the peninsulas don't extend the exact same distance. So there are some kind of, kind of things about the latitude and longitude that you might not be aware of.
Okay.
One is if you're going to start in San Diego, California, right on the Mexican border, and then drive east on a line of latitude, you'll end up on the East Coast in Charleston, South Carolina. I think a lot of folks think that San Diego, being on the border is going to be much further south, maybe as far as Jacksonville, Florida, but no, it's latitude per latitude is right even with Charleston, South Carolina.
That's really
Similarly, deep South Texas extends almost as far south as South Florida. So most people know Florida for being, subtropical. Miami's way down there, but a lot of folks don't know that deep South Texas extends just about as far.
Holy.
The Mexican border right around Brownsville, you follow on a latitude east, you're going to end up in Miami. So Florida does extend a little bit further south than that, but
That's
South Texas is every bit as subtropical as South Florida is. And the third kind of quirk based on the shape of the country is that Reno, Nevada is further west than Los Angeles. So you think of Reno, it's up in the mountains, it's near Lake Tahoe, it's pretty far inland, and Los Angeles is sitting right there on the coast, but longitude wise, Reno is further west than LA. My favorite naming oddity in American geography is West St. Paul, Minnesota. Why this is so funny is that it's southeast of St. Paul. And it's not like it's a case where it was originally founded, the historic part of St. Paul was east there and it just developed west. No, the West St. Paul, when it was founded, it was already south of the historic district of St. Paul, and now it's southeast of the city. So from a naming perspective, I think it's pretty hilarious. A couple of placement oddities in the U.S. are that there are two places that are part of U.S. states, but you have to drive through Canada to get to them. One of them is called the Northwest Angle in Minnesota, and this is, an area is part of Minnesota, but in order to get there by road, you have to drive through Manitoba to get to it. And the other is Point Roberts, Washington. And in order to get to it by road, you have to drive through British Columbia. It's a lot closer to Vancouver,
That's
much
crazy.
more culturally tied to British Columbia than it is to Washington. So those are two pretty unique places in the U.S. that are really kind of more Canadian, but they are under U.S. jurisdiction.
Yeah, technically U.S.
And because I like the word discontiguous, I'm going to use that as a segue into this next quirk, and that is that there are two discontiguous counties in the U.S. Well, one of them is technically a parish in Louisiana, but that's the same as a county. So St. Martin Parish in Louisiana is discontiguous. There are two different parts of it. So in order to stay in that same parish, you have to drive through another one to get to it. And the other one is Norfolk County in Massachusetts, which is suburbs of Boston. So again, to stay in Norfolk County, you have to drive through a different county to get to it. So those are the two discontiguous county parishes in the U.S. The next has to do with city and county nomenclature and how that affects jurisdiction. And there are some pretty unique ones in the U.S. Virginia is the only state in the country that has cities and counties that are completely separate jurisdictions. The vast majority of Americans live in a city that is also a part of a county. So, for example, I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is part of Hamilton County. And before that, I lived in Monterey, California, which is part of Monterey County. But in Virginia, things are a lot different. So they'll have a city that is not within a county. So, for example, you have Roanoke. So you can live in the city of Roanoke, but you don't live in a county at all. You don't live in Roanoke County. The two are completely separate jurisdictions, and there's no other state that does that. The only other places in the U.S. that do that are St. Louis and Baltimore. So these are two places that are cities, the city of St. Louis and the city of Baltimore, but they're not part of St. Louis County or Baltimore County. But this is not something that is statewide with Missouri and Maryland. So again, Virginia is the only one that does that kind of weird thing with cities and counties being separate.
Wow.
And there are 4 cities in the U.S. that are both cities and counties at the same time. So the jurisdiction is the exact same thing. Those are San Francisco, Philadelphia, Denver, and Broomfield, Colorado. So these 4 are the city and counties, the exact same jurisdiction. So the city boundaries are the same as the county boundaries. And these are the only 4 like this in the U.S. The next has to do with metropolitan areas and how they're defined. And most folks know how the metro area populations are calculated, because you can't just say the central city of an area is the entire population, because say you live in Atlanta, it's not just Fulton County, it's also Gwinnett and DeKalb and Cobb and Clayton and Forsyth and all the other suburban counties. Or, if you live in Houston, it's not just Harris County, it's also Brazoria and Fort Bend and, Galveston County. So that's how every metropolitan area in the country is calculated. San Diego, California is unique, and it's the only metropolitan area with a population greater than 1 million, in which the metropolitan area is defined as a singular county. So San Diego County is the San Diego metropolitan area with about 3.1 million people. There are no suburban counties that add on to the metropolitan area in San Diego. The other really unique one is Providence, Rhode Island. It's the only metropolitan area with a population greater than 1 million in which the metropolitan area is a state. So the state of Rhode Island is the Providence metropolitan area, and that's the only one in the country that's like that. Right? And because I love me some segues, I'm going to use a discussion about metropolitan areas to go into my next quirk about Chicago.
Sounds good to me.
Think about how big Chicago is. It is huge. It's the 3rd biggest city in the country. Think about the metropolitan area's footprint. I mean, you got Cook County and Lake and DuPage and Will and Kendall and McHenry, and you got the northwestern corner of Indiana and Lake and Porter counties. And it's enormous. There are 9 million people that live in the metropolitan Chicago area. And if you live there, you're like, wow, we live in an enormous city, because you do.
Crazy.
But New York and LA are twice as big. So for as big as you think Chicago is, at 9 million people, there are over 18 million in LA.
Guys, it's only
and
5
over
million people in my whole
20 million in New York. So again, Chicago is huge, but it's way, way, way smaller than either New York or LA. And I'm going to keep the segue train rolling as I go on comparing metropolitan areas. I'm going to compare Toronto to American cities. This isn't really a quirk or an oddity, it's just more of an interesting fact. And most people know that Toronto is the biggest city in Canada. The metropolitan area for Toronto is about 5.8 million people. And where would that rank in the U.S.? Well, it'd be 9th. So it'd just be smaller than the Houston, Galveston Bay metro area, and just bigger than the Miami, Fort Lauderdale metro area. So if you're wondering where the biggest city in Canada would rank in the U.S., it'd be 9th.
Here we go.
One of my favorite ones is based upon signage and topography. And if you've driven in the eastern U.S., you might be very familiar with this one. Interstates 81 and 77 are both north-south oriented interstates that come together in southwestern Virginia and are the same highway for a short stretch. And that's pretty common throughout the U.S. There are portions of Indiana and Ohio where interstates 80 and 90 are the same. And there are portions of Pennsylvania where interstates 70 and 76 are the same. But so that's not unique, but what is unique is in southwestern Virginia, if you're going north on 77, when they merge, you'll be also going south on 81 or vice versa. And when you first see the sign, you're like, what on earth? How is this possible? That just some vandal just making a joke. But it's actually because at this stretch, they're going east-west. So if you're going north on 77, when you hit the interchange, you start going west. If you're going north on I-81, hit the interchange, start going east. So I think it's kind of a quirky, feature based on topography, but see those signs, I think it is pretty funny. The last 2 I wanted to mention are based on physical geography, and I've mentioned both of these in other videos. That's why I wanted to save these for last. The first is that the 2 biggest earthquakes in U.S. recorded history outside of Alaska have been in Missouri and South Carolina. So you think of the biggest earthquakes, you're going to think of the West Coast first for obvious reasons, but the 2 biggest ones have been back east. In the 19th century, there were huge earthquakes in the southeastern Missouri and in Charleston, South Carolina. And these places still have a very large earthquake risk, so they have to be careful there. But it's interesting to think that the 2 biggest earthquakes outside of Alaska have been in Missouri and South Carolina.
That's crazy.
And the last one that I'm going to mention is just how freaking empty central Nevada is. And there are so few people that live in this enormous area. So you can fit the entire state of Maine or South Carolina into this part of central Nevada. And there's a grand total of 100,000 people that live in an entire area. Actually, less than that, really. But you think about how big Maine and South Carolina are. Can you imagine only having 100,000 people in the entire state? So central Nevada is just an enormous area with very, very few people. So that's my list of geographic oddities and quirks in the U.S. And it's such a big country, you're bound to get some strange stuff like this. And some of them I think are pretty funny, and they're all pretty interesting. But I don't know, I love this country. I love some of the quirks and things that make it so unique. I hope you found the information in this video useful. If you did, please give me a thumbs up to let me know you approve.
Go check them out, you guys.
And if you're interested in stuff about road tripping across the U.S. and some geography stuff and some travel stuff, and consider subscribing to my channel. That's kind of stuff that I'm posting. But yeah, thanks for watching. Geography King signing out. About to take a road trip to North South Carolina.
That was so interesting. I can't believe I've taken so long to watch this video. Oh my goodness gracious me. There's most of those facts I had no idea about. The 2 biggest earthquakes has happened outside Alaska. I just would have assumed they would have been in California, because you always hear about California getting all of these earthquakes, but never anywhere else in the US, I feel. So that was definitely something new that I learned. But I feel like I learned a lot from that video in general. I always think it's crazy because these cities and metropolitan areas have so many people. Like I think he said Chicago he said 9 million people, right? But my entire country has less than 5 million people in it. So the sizes of these cities are just mind-blowing, and the country is just massive in population and in land as well. So yeah, that was really interesting. Let me know down below, what was your favorite fact on here? My favorite fact on here was probably the fact that I never realized that Texas, like the southern part of Texas, was like equal to Florida. That really blew my mind. I just never really thought about it before. Oh, and also the Tennessee one was crazy too. Super interesting. I just feel like it's stuff that I've never really thought of before, and I would have assumed differently. Do you know what I mean? So having it set out like this and telling you what the facts are and make you really think about it, like, oh wait, that's crazy. How did I not realize that already? So yeah, guys, thank you so much for watching. Like I said, go check out Geography King. I'm gonna leave the original video down below, so go check him out. And if you want to see more reaction videos from me, definitely feel free to subscribe down below. And if you want to join in on the live streams, I do them very, very regularly on Twitch. Come check me out. I will leave my link down below. It's free to join, free to watch, and all that good stuff. So we play some games over there. So if you're a gamer or you just like hanging out in general and you want to chat, feel free to come on over. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys. Mwah.